He was a brilliant commander, Emperor of France, a man who expanded the empire's borders through victorious wars. At the dawn of the 19th century, Napoleon Bonaparte rose with breathtaking speed from Republican general to emperor, seizing and concentrating immense power in his hands. For 2 decades, he shaped the destiny not only of France, but of all Europe.
This courageous soul,
wrote Stendhal, dwelt in a plain, thin, almost frail body. The energy of this man, the resilience with which he endured every hardship despite such fragility, seemed to his soldiers something beyond the limits of possibility. And here lies one of the reasons for the indescribable inspiration he awakened in his troops.
A more revealing portrait of Napoleon and of what would later be called Bonapartism, he unknowingly gave himself in the memoirs written on the island of St. Helena. I have not committed a single crime throughout my political life, and I could affirm this before the face of death. If I had been capable of crime, I would not be here. And why would I need it? I am too much a fatalist, and I despise mankind too deeply.
The beginning of Napoleon's life gave no hint of the unique role he was destined to play in history. He was born on August 15, 1769, in Ajaccio on the island of Corsica, into a poor, noble family, the Bonapartes, to lawyer Carlo and Maria Letizia. In 1796, Napoleon altered the pronunciation of the family name to Bonaparte. Besides him, there were 6 other children, 3 sons and 3 daughters.
At the time of his birth, Corsica had just fallen under French rule, and a powerful independence movement was unfolding under General Paoli, with Napoleon's father serving as his aide-de-camp. Yet after the Patriots were crushed, Carlo turned to the French and declared the capitulation of the rebels. This gave his children the chance to study in noble schools at the state's expense.
Napoleon entered the military academy at Brienne, where he spent 5 years. He stood apart from his peers, withdrawn, solitary, disliked. They mocked his small stature, his accent, his fiery temper. To assert himself, Napoleon often resorted to his fists, and in fights he had no equals. His favourite subjects were mathematics, geography, and history.
Looking ahead, it is worth recalling Stendhal's words. Unfortunately, both for him and for France, his general education remained quite incomplete. Apart from mathematics, artillery, military science, and Plutarch, Napoleon knew nothing. He was unaware of most of the great truths discovered in the last 100 years.
His superiority rested entirely on the ability to discover new ideas with astonishing speed, to judge them with flawless insight, and to carry them out with a willpower unmatched by anything. After Brienne, in 1784, the young man entered the Paris Military Academy, specialising in artillery. Yet he studied there for only a year. The death of his father forced Napoleon to return home to support his family. On Corsica, he was drawn into the struggle for liberation, a movement that grew stronger with the outbreak of the French Revolution in 1789.
2 years later, now a senior lieutenant, Napoleon served in an artillery regiment in Grenoble. There, he became an active member of the Jacobin Club. Soon, he returned to Corsica, where in April 1792, he was elected lieutenant colonel of the Volunteers Regiment. But destiny turned. In 1793, conflict with Paoli, leader of the separatists, forced Napoleon and his family to flee Corsica. His mother, with the younger children, settled in Marseille. Napoleon himself moved on to Nice, where he received command of a battery.
Napoleon's rise to military glory began in 1793, when his skillful command of artillery batteries led to the capture of Toulon, seized by royalist rebels and the English. For this triumph, he was made Brigadier General, Chief of Artillery of the Alpine Army. He was only 24. But fate turned against him. After the counter-revolutionary coup of 9 Thermidor, 1794, and the fall of Robespierre, Napoleon was imprisoned for his ties to the Jacobins. He remained behind bars for just over a month until Barras, a member of the new French Directory, rescued the disgraced general and took him as an aide.
Then came October 5th, 1795. With decisive artillery fire, Napoleon crushed the royalist uprising in Paris, saving the convention his reward, command of the Paris garrison and the internal forces of the capital. The young officer distinguished himself not only in battle, but also in the salons of Parisian society. His attitude toward women was peculiar. He considered love the pastime of idle souls, incapable of great deeds. He hates no more than he loves, Madame de Staël observed. For him, only he exists. All others are mere extras. She was right. Napoleon himself declared, by nature, women are destined to be our slaves. Women are our property.
In Marseille, he had a brief romance with Désirée Clary, the daughter of a local merchant. They exchanged letters for a time, but Napoleon ended the relationship, choosing instead to marry Joséphine de Beauharnais. Désirée, however, married Count Bernadotte and would one day become Queen of Sweden. Napoleon met Joséphine in the salon of Madame Tallien. Her true name was Rose Josepha, but Bonaparte preferred the second part and without hesitation renamed his beloved.
The beautiful Creole from Martinique enchanted the young general. He was not troubled by the difference in age, 26 to her 33, nor by the fact that she was a widow of General de Beauharnais, executed by the Jacobins, nor that she was the mother of 2 children. Later, despite countless mistresses, Napoleon would confess, "I was never in love, except with Joséphine." Yet Joséphine herself likely felt little affection for the thin, pale-faced Corsican with long, straight hair. Her motives were calculation, status, security, and comfort for herself and her children.
On March 9th, 1796, their civil marriage was sealed. The groom presented his bride with a sapphire ring engraved inside, "To the woman of my destiny." But destiny was cruel. Napoleon was almost always at war. Joséphine, in Paris, was far from faithful. Love faded. 3 years later, conqueror of Italy and Egypt, believing in his mission, he declared, "I have only one passion, only one mistress, France. I sleep with her. She has never betrayed me. She gives me her blood and her wealth."
The thought of divorce grew stronger. Joséphine could not give him an heir, a necessity for the dynasty of the man who, in 1804, became emperor. In 1809, the separation came. "Only God knows how hard this was for me," Napoleon said. "But there is no sacrifice I would not make for France." Yet he cared for Joséphine's children and for his own illegitimate sons. One by actress Eleanor de Noël de la Plaine, another by Polish noblewoman Maria Walewska, whose son would later serve as foreign minister under Napoleon III.
After the divorce, Napoleon sought the hand of the sister of Tsar Alexander I, but was refused. He then turned to Marie-Louise of Austria. In 1810, the marriage was arranged, the groom absent, replaced by Marshal Berthier. The following year, an heir was born. The emperor himself lived freely in matters of love, yet demanded Puritan discipline from his citizens. Free unions, common in the revolution, were banned. Napoleon even arranged marriages for his generals and courtiers, sometimes within 24 hours.
Let us return to the beginning of Bonaparte's ascent to glory. 1796 to 1797, the crushing of Austrian forces in Italy, the creation of the Cisalpine Republic, the plundering of Italy's artistic treasures, and finally, the peace treaty with Austria signed by Napoleon himself. 1798 to 1799, the Egyptian expedition. New victories. Yet in France, a crisis of power erupted. The threat of invasion by the anti-French coalition loomed. Napoleon abandoned his army in Egypt and returned. France greeted him as a triumphant hero.
November 9, 1799, the young popular general backed by loyal troops staged a coup d'etat. The Directory fell, representative bodies were dissolved. Under the new constitution of 1800, legislative power was divided among the Council of State, the Tribunate, the Legislative Corps, and the Senate. Executive power, however, was concentrated in the hands of the consulate. in reality in the hands of the first consul, Bonaparte.
2 years later, Napoleon pushed through a Senate decree making him consul for life. And 2 years after that, he crowned himself emperor. The foundation of his power was a clan, relatives and closest allies. They first occupied the highest offices in France and later a fair share of Europe's thrones. His brothers, his brother-in-law, his adopted son Eugène de Beauharnais, and Josephine's daughter Hortense.
All of Bonaparte's actions in domestic policy were aimed at strengthening his personal power, especially after the monarchist attempt on his life in December 1800. A carriage explosion killed 20 people. Napoleon survived. The conspirators were soon captured and executed. At the same time, he carried out sweeping administrative reforms. Prefects were appointed to govern departments accountable directly to the state. Mayors were installed in the cities.
A new civil code, the Code of Napoleon, guaranteed civil rights, property rights for peasants, and for those who had purchased confiscated lands of émigrés and the church. The French National Bank was created to safeguard the gold reserve and issue paper money. Tax collection was centralized. Through a concordat with Pope Pius VII, Catholicism was declared the state religion. A system of secondary schools and higher institutions was established. Many of Napoleon's reforms endure to this day.
At the same time, he understood the power of public opinion. Out of 173 Parisian newspapers, 160 were shut down, the rest placed under government control. A powerful police force was created and a secret intelligence service established. The emperor's economic policy was aimed at securing the dominance of the French bourgeoisie across the European market. To achieve this, he imposed the Continental Blockade against England, a measure that all states dependent on Napoleon were forced to join. He continued to redraw the political map of Europe. 1805, Austria defeated. 1806, the Confederation of the Rhine created from 20 German states. 1807, Prussia crushed. Napoleon now stood as master of almost all of Europe.
In every endeavor, he displayed astonishing energy, creative force, and colossal capacity for work. Content with only 2 or 3 hours of sleep each night, he accomplished alone what scarcely 100 men could achieve. The emperor involved himself in everything, even the smallest details of the theater. In the early years, his policies enjoyed popular support. Economic revival brought rising wages. Napoleon appeared as the savior of the fatherland. His victories stirred national pride and a surge of collective spirit.
But fatigue set in. Endless wars, constant conscription, discontent grew. To bend all of Europe to the interests of the French bourgeoisie proved impossible. In foreign policy, the emperor's ambition increasingly turned toward expanding his own power and securing the interests of his dynasty.
1812 to 1814, the years of decline for Napoleon's empire. Defeat in Russia, then on the battlefields of Western Europe. His first abdication and exile to the island of Elba in the Mediterranean. Then a triumphant return, the 100 Days. But in June 1815, final defeat. At Waterloo, a small Belgian village, the emperor became a prisoner of the English and was sent into exile on the island of St. Helena in the Atlantic Ocean. There he spent the last 6 years of his life.
In 1821, Napoleon died, whether from illness or from arsenic poisoning, no one knows. 16 years later, his remains were brought back to Paris. Yet the solemn reburial took place only in 1861 in the cathedral of the Hôtel des Invalides. His body rests in a tomb of red granite, a gift from Emperor Nicholas I, enclosed within 6 coffins. This man, in his unchanging grey coat and bicorny hat, secured his place in history, giving his name to an entire era.